I'm Alan Zhang, a sophomore at Harvard College and chair of the Harvard Public Opinion Project. For over 20 years, students like me have been conducting the nation's top poll of young Americans aged 18 to 29 on their political opinions, voting trends, and views of public service. We just released brand new findings from our spring poll covering the mental health crisis, identity, education, the upcoming midterm elections, and more. Here's what you need to know in less than 3 minutes.
First up, mental health. We kept looking into the numbers after last year's polls found that young people were facing a mental health crisis in America. Despite COVID restrictions easing nationwide, we found virtually no improvement in the levels of hopelessness or depression reported by young people in the past 2 weeks. 71% of those polled agreed that the country was facing a crisis of mental health, with nearly half of young Americans reporting that politics and news media were having a negative impact.
Our next theme was identity. This spring was our first time taking a deep dive into the issue.
And we found that 59% of young African Americans, 43% of AAPI youth, and 37% of young Hispanics feel under attack a lot in America based on their race or ethnicity.
On the other hand, young Americans across demographic and partisan divides were overwhelmingly comfortable with a close friend coming out as LGBTQ. We've been charting steady and growing support for this for over a decade. But despite growing acceptance from their young peers, nearly half of LGBTQ youth feel under attack a lot because of their sexual orientation, and only 34% feel comfortable expressing their true self and identity with their families.
Now let's talk about education.
Sorry.
Second only to the economy, young Americans rank education as more important to America's future global strength than the military, technology, or even democracy.
When it comes to education policy, by 2-to-1 margins, young Americans support greater parental control over education. By the same margins, young Americans support candidates that support teaching K-12 students that racism, intentional or not, is a fixture of American laws and institutions. At the college level, 85% of young Americans favor some sort of government action on student loan debt, but only 38% favor total debt cancellation.
Okay, let's talk politics and elections. With the midterms on the horizon, President Biden's approval rating amongst young Americans is at 41%. That's down 5 points from last fall. 52% approve of his handling of the pandemic, 46% approve of his performance regarding Ukraine, but only 34% approve of how the president is handling the economy. Meanwhile, youth turnout in November is currently on track to match the record-breaking numbers seen in 2018. But more young Americans feel that they can't make a tangible impact via political involvement, and that politics can't meet the challenges that we're facing. Those feelings could ultimately impact turnout.
Meanwhile, 55% of likely voters prefer Democratic control over Congress, compared to 34% of voters who prefer Republican control. But still, a majority of young people still believe that the Republican Party cares more about the interests of the elite than the interests of people like them. And a plurality say the same about the Democratic Party.
And that's our major headlines for the Spring 2022 Youth Poll. Go to iop.harvard.edu to see the full findings, including data on media consumption, trust in institutions, and political engagement. And be sure to follow @HarvardIOP on socials for the latest updates.